So good morning, everybody. This is John Soldatos from Innovax Limited XR 5.0 project, but also the Beyond XR cluster, a cluster of European funded projects on extended reality. And I would like to welcome you on our third webinar. This time, it's a webinar devoted on the ethical and legal aspects of extended reality and the metaverse. We will be navigating the ethical and the legal issues raised in the metaverse space and in extended reality applications and the blending of extended reality with a number of technologies like artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, industrial Internet of Things. We have two excellent speakers with an excellent understanding of both the technological, the business, and the legal issues. And we would like from them to give us insights on what are the applicable regulations when we talk about metaverse and extended reality applications, and how the regulatory environment can become an ally for innovation and not a setback. So without any further comments, I would like to give the floor to Alessandro Pacchiaroni from the Openverse project. Alessandro, please feel free to introduce yourself, introduce your project, and proceed with your talk. The floor is yours.
Many thanks, John, for the introduction, for organizing this webinar. As John said, I'm Alessandro Pacchiaroni. I work at the Lisbon Council as a digital governance expert. My background is at the intersection between the social and the technological aspects of our society. I have a specific focus on the public sector in my background, but as you can imagine, things are not so different within or outside the public sector. Organizations are still organizations. They have different social rules and so on, but eventually they have also similarities. The project that I am bringing today, let's say, is Openverse. So the project is on open and co-created virtual worlds for Europe. I will introduce it a little bit in the first couple of slides, and then I will move on to the more specific content of the presentation of today. Before we begin, actually, I would like to say that what I present today is a selection of other people's work and ideas, and I compiled them together to highlight what I think it's an aspect that it's a little bit, it goes a little bit unnoticed or overlooked perhaps today, which is that one of regulation being a force of innovation and not necessarily innovation and regulation being in a dichotomy and opposed to each other. So I will try to argue why, and also give some, towards the end of the presentation, go a little bit more into the details or overall do a reality check, so look at what's happening in reality. But in any case, just for you to know. Also, this presentation comes as part of the work of Openverse and Beyond, but obviously the views here are not necessarily only in line with the ones of the European Commission. So, getting to the project, as you can see, Openverse, I already mentioned it's on open and co-created virtual worlds. The name is quite self-explanatory in terms of also what are the aims of the project. We'll look at the challenges that it aims to address in a second, but overall what's important to keep in mind, let's say, it's that the idea of Openverse is that of a study with also leading to practical insights and also applied research. There are several experiments in the project to set a strong and common basis across Europe for European virtual worlds, for a European, if you will, operationalization of European values in virtual worlds. And here's why we have this focus on open and co-created virtual worlds in the name. Here in this slide, you can also see a couple of more specific details. Here you can see the partners. The project is coordinated by the Lisbon Council, which is the think tank that I work for. And here we can see already the challenges that the project aims to address. So the idea, as I briefly mentioned, is to ensure that the future virtual worlds will consider human-centric dimension, et cetera, so basically that they are based on European values, that they are not necessarily technology driven or not at all. And if they are, that there is a reason why, in a way, like that there is a clear value, a clear problem being solved by the application of a certain technology, and a benefit for the real world. So in this sense, let's say a more detailed specification of this is to need to ensure higher accessibility, greater freedom and control, lower barriers to entry, especially also for when it comes to actors that have a different means and different resources available. Also, the need to ensure interoperability, privacy, and security. This goes hand in hand with data ownership, and then to still be open to innovation, creativity, and social benefits for all, so to speak. Here you can have a look at what are the exploitable results, the key exploitable results of the project. So at this point, we are almost halfway through the project, not yet. So the work is getting, let's say, more and more productive by the minute. I don't remember by heart all the deliverables that went out, but definitely the preliminary, or I mean the first studies in terms of scanning the whole virtual worlds landscape from the technologies to their applications and so on have been produced, as well as the first policy brief. However, they're not public yet because we still have to undergo the first review to validate them. Now, getting to sorry, got a notification from WebEx. Getting to the specific topic of this presentation. If you have the feature to raise your hand, it would be nice. I don't know if I can see it, but it would be nice to see how many of you, just by raising the hand here on WebEx, think that regulation drives innovation. If you do not have the feature, okay, no, I can see, well, I see the notification of one by one raising their hands, so probably it would take a little too much to, or not so much, because for the moment I see only one. Anyways, as I said before, I will try to challenge this maybe a little bit and open for discussion for today or for the future. The idea here is to move beyond that dichotomy and to understand how regulation plays a key role in innovation, which is not the one of stopping it, contrasting it, or threatening it even. I'm starting, admittedly, a little bit from far away, meaning that I'm starting from socio-technical systems. In this slide, which, by the way, I realized I forgot to cite the main authors, so I will add it to the presentation that we will share. In this slide, we see a very, very, very high-level representation of socio-technical systems. Basic idea here is that we have in the world and in how our life works, if you will, we have a social component and a technical component, which come together at some point. Now, the social component, quite straightforwardly, is our culture, our social institution, people. The technical component, it's made by what comes from the Greek word techneson, not just the technology as we understand it right now, like a laptop, but also how tables are built, how streets are built, how literally materials and infrastructure, things that are material and infrastructure are built around us. And there is this intersection, which is where, in a way, we interact. Social aspects, social dimension interacts with the technical dimension. Going more into the detail, sometimes it's stated that there is this interaction happens by the means of tasks. So people, the social dimension, creates a technology for a certain purpose. And there is this dual relationship, this bidirectional relationship, whereby the intent of people in creating a technology shapes how the technology is built. If I want to build a knife, I will build it with a blade and with a handle so that I don't cut myself, but I can cut something. At the same time, the knife will shape how perhaps I can do some tasks. We know knife, it's used for several purposes, not just to cut a piece of a tomato, maybe. So this is a basic lens through which we can look at the world. Now, getting to how this interplays in industrial revolution, technological revolution, we see that there is a concept of techno-economic paradigms. Techno-economic paradigms are configurations in which the technological component and the social component interact towards, let's say, the development of different ways of production. Here's why the industrial revolutions. If you can recall the ones that we studied in school, like the steam and so on, and the one of microprocessors, which is the one that brings us to today, and the current one on semiconductors. Now, what's important for us in all this is the social dimension. This is simply simplified, but the social dimension, which here we can see with business models, and then the technological dimension, which here we can see with the general purpose technology. So the idea in techno-economic paradigms is that there is a range of possibilities in which new technologies are potentially being used combined with business models, with ways of production, with a social organization of the work and of the human activities. And among this range of opportunities, there is the idea of a techno-economic paradigm, which is the dominant one. It becomes the dominant one throughout industrial revolutions and technological revolutions. And this is what makes the revolution happen in a way. This is what changes all aspects of life. We can go back and look at what has happened with the first introduction of computers and before the different ways in which industrial production changed and so on. So what's important here is to understand that any sort of change, and here is where innovation comes into play, happens with this interaction between the social and technological dimension. Now, what's the role of regulation in this? The regulation safeguards those aspects of the social system that we do not want to change. Regulation can also be challenged. So the role of regulation is that of a safeguard, means that it is there to protect and to make sure that in these wide changes, there is the social construct, the social institutions, the social dimension changes, but not to the extent of changing the aspects that we believe are fundamental. For instance, human rights. Here's why regulation is, for example, that of GDPR on privacy and so on. At the same time, regulation and policy here I'm introducing act as a catalyst of innovation among the different possible trajectories. So, for instance, I think a very good example here is that of the AI Act. In this case, what we agreed as a society, at least in Europe, is that we do not want automation and the use of artificial intelligence and its capabilities in terms of reasoning, synthesis of data, etc., to be used, for instance, to make decisions on certain aspects of our life, such as law enforcement, because we believe that that's too much of a threat. So it's here it acts as a safeguard. And what it does in this sense, it also as a catalyst, meaning that it directs innovation towards the aspects of life where we believe that this technology can really be helpful. Maybe with a revolution, because for instance, we see how artificial intelligence can be used in drugs discovery, and it's looking like it's already revolutionizing the ways in which this is done. So there is this element, but it's directed towards something that we believe it's useful for people. Because at the end of the day, maybe another takeaway for throughout my whole talk is the fact that innovation for innovation's sake, it's pointless. We need to have a point there. So how is this happening in practice? This is from a report from McKinsey on the next arenas of competition. It's a public report, so maybe I can share the link later, or you can easily find it. What this report observes is the fact that how these arenas of competitions are built, or they come to exist in a way, because it's not necessarily intended. They observe some very basic factors in a way, so the size of the market cap, the dynamicity, and so on, which are all aligned with what I was saying before in terms of technological revolutions. And this is what they observed. This report is the most recent one. So here you see that there are the 4 arenas of today that look like they will still exist in the future as arenas of competitions. What they call as 3 spin-offs, so let's say a little bit of an evolution or a transformation of some of the arenas of today, and then 11 emergent arenas. And here you can see a little bit, if you go into the details, how different technologies and different modes of production, business models, and so on, ways of configuring the work and the social interactions come into play in each of these arenas. Again, the role of regulation is that of safeguarding and making sure that in all this and beyond, of course, because here pretty much everything it's quite straightforward, besides we have some autonomous vehicles and so on, the goal stays on what's important for our well-being. They also add, and here we have the virtual reality and augmented reality, they also add some other industries that could emerge as the arenas of tomorrow, but are not. They decided that it's not. There are some factors that challenge this insight, and so they didn't align them. So here, interestingly, you see virtual reality and augmented reality. I believe that their argument, if I'm not mistaken, is that of a bit of a too high uncertainty, while of course for something to become an arena of competition, there has to be a quite sure market, basically. Now, bringing all this together, this book is here just as a reference. The main idea is that innovation has to be linked to a clear benefit. There has to be a change, and there has to be a benefit for people. And once again, the role of the regulation and policy frameworks is that of directing all these potential configuration of technologies and business models into something that brings a benefit to the people. The book is here, The Innovator's Dilemma. One of the main points is that of the incumbent industries, whether they should keep serving their current market, their current customers, or whether they should be moving towards new needs and new customers. So obviously innovation comes with pushing and trying to address new markets and the new customer needs. At the same time, it should be made sure that this does not go in a way uncontrolled, and this does not go towards needs that that could be even threatening for humans. At the same time, and here is how it acts as a catalyst for innovation, how regulation acts as a catalyst for innovation. The main point is that by steering and directing what kind of innovation we would like to have, we also make sure that our bets aren't spread too thin across too many sectors, across too many potential applications, and that they serve a purpose. That of, for instance, again, overall improving humans' well-being. Now here I'm sort of quoting an ad that I don't know if you can recall, but for everything else there's research. What's my point here? That there are ways in which we can challenge a regulation and we can challenge what we know, and that's, at least in my opinion, science and research. That's a constant drive to further our knowledge. And we know that regulations have different applications in research settings. For instance, we have also this idea of the regulatory sandboxes, where we have this regulatory learning, which could be considered as a little lab where you can do your own research. Now, I also am very well aware of the fact that regulatory sandboxes, like everyone talks about it and no one knows how they look like. But at the same time, we do have some examples, I believe. For instance, Accelerate Estonia is I believe, implementing a first version of it in a way. So again, what's my point? It's not like everything is about innovation. Innovation has some clear principles, which is that of solving problems and that of I mean, there are many, but what matters for us right now, it's the main one, I believe, it's that one of having an impactful change, that of solving problem, and of course that of being widely adopted. Otherwise, you just did something new, but if it's not adopted by many, it's not really innovation. But it's not everything about that. We have ways of challenging what's possible in terms also of regulation. So at this point, you may ask, so what? The main point is that regulation should be challenged, but it should also be upheld. Now, a few examples, and this brings us to the conclusion of my presentation. A few examples that are a bit more detailed on extended reality, I would say virtual worlds overall, and that could spark the discussion now or later, are these. And for instance, the IPR, intellectual property regulation, we know that it's tightly coupled with innovation, because we know that it's an incentive, for example, in pharmaceutical industry, we know it's an incentive to innovate. It's an incentive to invest in innovation because I have a return of investment. And this, in a way, at least in a business economic setting, makes my time and my effort worth. We also know that the current IPR, intellectual property regulation, is challenged by the configuration of virtual worlds, especially when it comes here. This is a focus of Openverse on co-creation, on co-created virtual worlds. So this is definitely something where we would like research and innovation to go together, and where regulation, the current regulation, the current configuration of it should probably be challenged for the benefit, for the well-being of humans. Another one is the labor market. The policy brief that I was mentioning before actually looks at small and medium enterprises in immersive technologies and overall operating in virtual worlds. I'm not sure if this comes as a surprise, but their main issues are actually related to the good old regulations like labor market and taxation. For instance, in Europe, we do not have a regime for remote workers. You need to be hired, you can be hired as an employee only where the organization, your employer, has a physical headquarter, a physical office. Otherwise, you need to be hired as an external consultant. Clearly, in a world that is virtual and that basically blends, or if doesn't erase this reality, the material, the physical location of people, this is something that could be quite challenging because it would require people to move while there wouldn't be, in fact, any reason for them to move to execute their job. Taxation is also another issue or challenge. In this case, there's maybe two facets of this, even more maybe. One is that of hiring again, so it's related to the labor market. One is related to retaining talent in Europe. We have a quite harsh competition in terms of salary packages, salary and benefit packages from US companies. So there's a consideration here to be made in terms of how this affects the possibilities of European SMEs or overall European businesses to retain talent. Another challenge maybe is that of overall taxation systems throughout Europe. But I'm not an expert, so I won't go into the detail. But just to mention that it's something that it's relevant. It also goes hand in hand with payment systems and so on, and this goes very much. This is very tied to the ways in which businesses can operate in virtual worlds with payment systems across platforms, with situations in which there is a concentration or a vendor lock-in in terms of payments and so on. Data governance. The GDPR definitely upholds certain principles, that of privacy and so on, that I believe are commonly agreed on in our society. At the same time, there can be situations in which these perhaps could be challenged and could be configured in a different way. You can find more on this from someone that is much more of an expert than I am, which is Enrico Letta, and it's his report on Much More Than a Market. Internet governance, for instance, network fees. This is something that has already an impact on the configuration of today, let alone if we will more and more expand on virtual worlds, on extended reality, on things that heavily rely on the internet infrastructure. At the same time, overall, in internet governance, I believe it's important to highlight how the governance framework is made, how the governance system works, whether it's a bottom-up system or a top-down system, and the distributed governance of internet, which is something that I believe it's challenged today. We have, it's not like I believe, it's like we have certain examples that tell us that this is challenged around the world. Maybe there should be a heavier focus on this and on upholding this in Europe, at least. So, to summarize, I hope I gave a good argument to to think about how regulation can be seen as a force for innovation, how they are in interplay, and a way of also approaching regulation when it comes to our work that takes that more as a factor that that should not necessarily be not as a threat, but as a factor that can be helpful, can be useful, or can be challenged with, in a way, the due considerations. Of course, there can be also, or there are there are many other regulations or policies, at least, or policy domains that could be seen as the ones to challenge right now. Maybe we can start from that if someone has any question or for a discussion, John, or overall, maybe that's a question for the next days for all of us to think about. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope this was insightful and interesting, and happy to take any question.
Thank you, Alessandro. Let me ask the audience whether there is any question, and of course I can check the chat as well. In the meantime, I don't know, till we have somebody bold to ask a question. I would like to ask something. This is also for the second talk, but I would like to ask you first. In Europe, which are the prime regulations that affect innovative journeys in the metaverse? So, which is the list of regulations that can affect my innovation, my development in Europe? Do you have something like this in metaverse, like how AI Act affects this, how GDPR affects this, other regulations? Because the question is motivated because we have a rich regulatory landscape in Europe, right, with a lot of regulations. So I was wondering, in this specific technology, right, extended reality, augmented reality, metaverse.
Yeah.
Where do I start?
Yeah.
To put it this way, we have also some young researchers in the audience. So how do they start navigating the regulatory environment, both in terms of regulations, but also in terms of issues, right? Like IPR and content, which you mentioned as a very important one. This is my question, Alessandro.
I think in terms of priorities and impact, definitely that of intellectual property is the one that has the potential of, well, making the most damage or bringing the most benefits. Because of the nature of this, of the extended reality and virtual worlds and metaverse and its distribution and its collaboration between different users, different entities. Also, basically an unprecedented collaboration between, or potential collaboration between individuals and larger organization in the creation of content, of spaces and so on. So definitely the intellectual property has a big impact on it. That of data sharing as well, in the sense that I believe this also goes a bit hand in hand, but also the whole, let's say, innovation in terms of the introduction of new tools such as the visors and so on, is also a radical change in a way in how we use technology, and it can bring a lot of benefits, but it's also very it can challenge, and it can be a big risk. I believe, I'm not 100% sure because I'm quoting someone else and I haven't verified, but I believe that a person can be identified by only a single movement of their eye, a person can be identified. So this is a big thing. At the same time, if we do not share data, there is something that I learned recently, not recently, learned in the early days at the Lisbon Council. We changed a little bit what I was used to think before. There is this idea or this concept that data is the new oil. There is a counter argument to that. The fact that we believe that data is the new oil makes us think that who has more and who uses more will be in power, but it will also puts us in this sort of competition to have it. However, the biggest impact from data, from using data, is that of sharing it. So data is not the new oil. Why I'm saying this? Because I think that even though there are clear threats and clear risks coming from new technologies, from XR and so on, in terms of, for example, privacy, we should still strive for data sharing. We just have to find a way how to do that. Closing very quickly on this, just to make the point that I believe, and I think this is also coming up a little bit from the research that we're doing, for example, for the policy brief, there are some of these regulations, like the ones that I just said, that have a big impact. However, we also really find basically the same old friends. We really still see that for this field to thrive, at least from the business or economical aspect, we still see that there are the same old friends, the same old labor law, taxation, and so on, that really are the main obstacles that entrepreneurs themselves talk about when they talk about having issues in this field. So yeah, this.
Thank you, Alessandro. So to summarize, right, when you try to innovate in the extended reality space, intellectual property of the content is very important, especially because there are different actors that contribute to developing a metaverse. Then the privacy, especially if you have sensitive data. And last, you said that the classical regulatory environment for entrepreneurs can create also, can have also an impact. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the contribution and for answering my question. I don't know if there are any, I don't see any other questions in the chat. And so I want to go to our next speaker, Marcello, Professor Corrales. The floor is yours. Let me know if I need to share the presentation or if you managed to do it. And yes, the floor is yours. Shall I share your presentation, Marcello?
Yes, because I was trying to share, but
Okay.
apparently you cannot see it. So, and then yes, that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
In the meantime, maybe I can, follow up on what Alessandro said. Thank you very much for your presentation. Of course, you made a bold statement that regulation drives innovation, right? And it should be seen as a force, which I was surprised because sometimes, usually people think the opposite, right? And as a lawyer, I appreciate your comment. People usually don't like lawyers or regulators. But yeah, to some extent, I agree with you, but I can also understand the other perspective, especially from the IT sector, that also stifles innovation because sometimes, especially like the European, in Europe, we tend to have very strong rules, very strict regulations, such as the GDPR and now with the AI Act, right? And that and that raises the bar too high sometimes for the IT sector, right? But on the other hand, raising the bar also pushes people to make the next step, right? So it is a matter of perspective, and we had to find the right balance there. But what I definitely agree is that it can also be seen whether this is a catalyst or stifles innovation. That's one question, but it can definitely can be seen as a tool to create more trust within the environment. And this is usually the approach that I try to take. And I would like to share with you one of the projects that I'm currently working on with a
Marcelo,
great...
by the way, I am this guy that you described, the IT wannabe innovator that think that you are boring and you are, creating obstacles for us. So this is why I didn't raise my hand, but I'm this guy that you described.
Yeah. I knew that you were that type of guy. You look like one of those, John.
Okay, so please, just go on, introduce your...
Yes, sure, of course. Yeah, I always find myself in the middle of people who like lawyers and people who doesn't. So I managed to navigate there very well, hopefully. I try not to get myself into trouble. So coming back to the project, yeah, so it's a 3 years project. We started 1 year ago. The acronym is called XR 5.0. And the title of the project is about human-centric AI-enabled extended reality applications for the Industry 5.0. Can you go to the next slide, please, John? Or because I'm not sure if I can move it around here. Right, so very quickly, the goal of the project is about developing advanced XR applications such as virtual realities, augmented realities, and mixed realities designed specifically for industrial workers as part of the Industry 5.0. Why do we think that this is important? Why do we think that this matters? The reason is that current XR tools, while they may improve safety and production, they also lack personalization. So yeah, XR 5.0 focuses on customized and worker-centric XR experiences that adapt to individual skills, traits, and work environments, promoting efficiency and safety. Next slide, please, John. So, and these are just one of the key highlights for you about the project, just to put it into context before I delve into details regarding the ethical and legal issues. Some of the key highlights are AI integration, this means that advanced AI will enhance XR by creating dynamic and intelligent visualizations in industrial tasks. It is also about human-centered digital twins. That means that there are some virtual replicas of physical processes that enables better monitoring, training, and as I mentioned before, personalization. And of course, we want to take into account all the European values and be in compliance with the new European standards and regulations such as safety, privacy, and ethical AI. And of course, the project is very much focused on training and upskilling. So industrial workers will train using ergonomic and customized extended realities environments. Next one, please. So the project is a very big project. There are 25 partners from different 10 mainly European countries, but there are also some very good companies from Switzerland, and there are 6 pilot cases. Next one, please. So some of these pilots are focused on human-centric AI enabled for product design. There are also for remote maintenance and asset management. Another pilot is for smart water pipes based on XR streaming. So this is for training the workers operator to fix these kind of pipes. And the next one, yes, so we also have another pilot which is focused on aircraft maintenance training. And then we also have another pilot for increasing effectiveness and safety in product assembly and repair processes. And then the last pilot number 6, is about human-centric guidance and troubleshooting for customer service. So this is all using an extended realities environment. So the workers, they wear the XR headset, and they use the technology to deal with different kind of tasks in the so-called Industry 5.0. So my job there, along with a great team of people, including many of the members of the project, because this is a team effort, is about building a strong and robust ethical and legal framework. This is what I wanted to share with you from a more rather practical perspective. What I think these are the three main pillars that you have to take into account when you're working in a project that deals with this kind of technology. So the main pillar, of course, is the legal that we discussed already with Alessandro, right? There are different kind of regulation. Of course, you have all the typical suspects, such as the infamous GDPR, pretty much loved by IT software developers. We also have now the EU AI Act. There are a lot of new reforms, especially in the liability sector. So there is the amendment to the Product Liability Directives and AI Liability Directive. So it is always very good to stay abreast of these kind of new regulatory reforms. And of course, there is a host of new cybersecurity regulations. So you have the NIS2 directive, the Cybersecurity Act, the Cyber Resilience Act, and so forth. So this is very challenging moments because it's a little bit of a moving target. And so we are in the outset of this kind of projects and regulatory approaches. So that's the first pillar. Then we have the second pillar, which is the ethical principles and guidelines. And this is very important for us. And we use different kind of guidelines, but we use the high-level expert group guidelines on trustworthy AI as a yardstick. So this is, I think this is a very good starting point, because I will show you in the next slide. By focusing on ethical principles, you can already cover most of the legal issues. Not all of them, but most of them. I would say like 70, 80% of it. Because with the ethical aspect, you can already cover some privacy issues, some data security issues, and so on. So the best approach is to put them together, but this is a very good starting point. And then the third pillar are different kind of standards and frameworks. These are not legally binding tools, right? But this is very much used in the industry. So you have to use the famous ISO standards, for example, 27001, which is about data security. That's a very good starting point. Then my suggestion is always to leverage to other standards, such as 27701, which is about privacy information management systems. And then there are new standards now, which are pretty much focused on our artificial intelligence, such as the ISO 42001. So these are the kind of standards that we are looking into it right now. Some of them were implemented already in the project, some others are not quite yet implemented, or we're discussing, because of course you have to customize and tailor-make these specifically to your use cases, such as the use cases that I mentioned before. And there are these other two, for example, the NIST AI Risk Management Framework and HUDERIA, which is focusing more on human rights. And yeah, there are also good standards. So I'm not saying that you have to implement all of them, because there will be a lot of overlapping, but you have to pick and mix according to your specific project. So next slide, please, John. And what I will do now is that, I don't have too much time, I have 10 minutes, but I will try to go through very quickly to the ALTAI principles. This is the guideline that I mentioned, the ethics guideline for trustworthy AI. This is something that we're currently implementing in the project XR 5.0, as I mentioned. Next slide, please. And this is a little bit of the structure of the guidelines. It has 3 chapters. Basically, in the introduction, what it tells you that trustworthy AI must have three main components. One is that it has to be lawful or legal, right? Taking into account all the regulations that I mentioned before, has to be ethical, taking into account principles and values from the European Union, and it has to be robust, not only from a technical perspective, but also from a social perspective, as Alessandro was discussing before. And so there are three chapters in this guideline. The first chapter delves into ethos regarding four main ethical principles, which is respect for human autonomy, the prevention of harm, fairness, and explicability. Then in chapter 2 is about the realization of this trustworthy AI and breaks it down in 7 key requirements. And these requirements are the ones that you have to implement in the project. And these requirements are human agency and oversight. Then you have technical robustness and safety. You have privacy and data governance, transparency, diversity and non-discrimination, social and environmental well-being, and accountability. And finally, you have to find a tool, a methodology to operationalize these key requirements. And I will show you a tool at the end that you can use in your project. And this is what we are implementing right now. Next slide, please. Okay, so how much time do I have, John? Is it until 11 or? You're on mute, John.
Please take the time. Deliver the presentation properly. Okay.
Okay. No worries. Yeah, I also want to avoid rushing too much, but I will try to finalize this as soon as possible. So there are 7 requirements that you have to implement in your project. The first one is about human agency and human oversight. This is very important because it is also mentioned in the AI Act, for example, and also to some extent in the GDPR and other regulations. So human agency is about that users should be able to make informed and autonomous decisions, right? Users should know how AI works and how to change the decisions. Yeah, they should respect autonomy and avoid hidden manipulation. And yeah, so this is about the decision-making process, and that there is always the user. They all have to have the right to accept or not the decisions provided by the AI system. Next slide, please. So requirement number 1 is broken down in 2 parts. So human agency, as we mentioned, and then you have the human oversight aspect. And in the guideline, you will see that there are 3 different kinds of human oversight. You have human in the loop, which is when a person can step in at each stage of the AI system decision cycle. Then you have human on the loop. This is when a person monitors the AI system during this decision and operation, but does not interfere every time, right? So the human intervention is during the design and the monitoring phases. And then you have the so-called human in command, which is when a person oversees the entire system, but can choose when to use or stop the AI and considers the broader impact, such as economic, societal, legal, and ethical. So that's one aspect of the human oversight. You will see in the literature that they always refer to human in the loop as a general concept, but in the guidelines and also in the AI Act is very good to break it down into these 3 aspects and to make sure what kind of human oversight your AI system is capable of doing. Another thing that is, just one more thing. Yeah. Another thing that is important to take into account is whether the AI system is self-learning or is fixed rule AI, right? Because with self-learning, it needs closer monitoring because, yeah, it has the ability to override, and fixed rule is more predictable, so less oversight is needed. This is something very important. Next one, please. Then you have requirement number 2. This is probably the most complicated one because it's very technical. It's about technical robustness and safety. And there are different kind of aspects here. You have one, for example, which is resilience to attacks, but you have to ensure that this AI, that the AI is certified. So that's very important. And here you can go back to the, for example, cybersecurity regulations, such as the Cybersecurity Act, which mentions these kind of certifications and in collaboration with NISA. You have to check that you should assess the adversarial attacks, right? This, for example, hacking, and that can be, so you have to come up with a risk-based approach, also taking into account the AI Act. As you know, the attacks can be to the data, such as data poisoning, or to the model, such as model leakage, or to the underlying infrastructure. Accuracy is something very important. This is how well an AI system makes correct decisions and prediction. So you have to ensure that the training data is accurate, is high quality, and is representative of the environment. And you have to implement different kind of measures to monitor the metric. You have to implement security and perform penetration tests and so on. So this is something that you have to do it together with your technical team, and it's in my experience is one of the one that takes more time, but it's also obviously connected to the GDPR because of the data security and the cybersecurity regulations. And then we have requirement 3, which is about privacy. Yeah, if you can go to the next slide, please, John. Requirement number 3, privacy and data governance. So we have, this is something that in the project we are taking our time to make sure, because we are dealing with a lot of personal data from the workers in the factories, for example, and also sensitive data. So one of the things that you have to do is to assess whether you're using personal data or not in your project. And then you have to implement the necessary GDPR measures, such as data protection impact assessment and oversight mechanism. Here, there are, for example, here there's a lot of overlapping already with the GDPR, as you can see. Implement privacy by design measures, such as anonymization and pseudonymization, access protocols, and data subject rights is very important. This is something that we are implementing through the consent of users, right? So in the consent form, you can spell out already the different kind of data subject rights that the people, the participant in this kind of project can have. This is, for example, the right to withdraw consent, the right to delete information, the right to correct your information, and so on. And then you have to align with relevant data management and governance standards, as I mentioned. A good one is the ISO 27701, which is about privacy information management system, and other standards. And you have to ensure the data quality and integrity to avoid biases, inaccuracy, errors, mistakes, and so on. And the next one. So the 4th requirement, I will go a little bit faster now, so I can also make my point in the last slide. So requirement number 4 is about transparency. This is about there are different elements, as you can see: traceability, explainability, communication. So it's all about being transparent to the users. You have to explain it. You have to tell them that you are using an AI system, right? They need to know how the AI system works, what it does, and how it affects people, what are the risks involved, and so on. So it's all about communication. A good starting point, as I mentioned, is the consent form in this case. Otherwise, you have to come up with other ideas how to convey the message to the people using the AI system. The next slide, please. And then we have requirement number 5 is about diversity, non-discrimination, and fairness, right? So you have to avoid unfair bias, accessibility, and universal design is also very important. It has to be user-centric, which is what we are doing in our project. Our project is all about being user-centric and personalization. But this also means that the design of your AI system and product, they have to be for everybody, and you need to make sure that everybody, people with disabilities, for example, can also use your AI system. And you have to make sure that you involve all the stakeholders, in this case, workers, customers, communities, etc., during the developing and testing of the product. This is also maybe consistent with what Alessandro said regarding the regulatory sandboxes, which I find it pretty interesting as well. This could be a good way to do it. Of course, in Europe, the regulatory sandboxes, they came out a little bit late. They actually started a few years ago in other jurisdictions, such as the UK, Australia, and then in Southeast Asia. They implemented these regulatory sandboxes years ago, and now it came to Europe. I actually wrote a book chapter on this, and I can share with you later if you're interested. But now we can go to the last 2 requirements. Next slide, please. So you have requirement number 6 is societal and environmental well-being. So it has to be sustainable. You have to take into account the social impact and the society in general, because as you know, while AI system, they can do a lot of good, unintentionally, sometimes they can also do a lot of harm. And next slide, please. And then finally, somebody has to be accountable, right? And you have to find a way to audit your system. They have to be auditable, and you have to come up with a trade-off between ethical principles and innovation. And this boils down also to what Alessandro was saying. This is more from an ethical point of view, but in this way, of course, ethics has to prevail against the system goals and maybe innovation. Next slide, please. And this one we can go very quickly. I want to show you because we always stay in the surface, right? So this is somewhere all in the cloud. How can you bring all these requirements down to earth? How can you operationalize this? How can you implement effectively in your project? So there is a website and how to implement these Altai tools. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, you will have to talk to your security team, management, legal teams, and so on. This is not something that you can do on your own. If you click on this website, on this link, it will take you to this the Altai portal created by the European Commission. Next slide, please. And then, well, there are 4 steps. The first step, you have to register to do the website. Then you have to log in, read the instruction, of course, and then you can share your ideas and answer the questions. Next one, please. And then, so this is a registration. You go here to log in. Next one, please. Once you register, right, you will log in. John, next slide, please. Thank you. And then you go to My Altai. You will see that one in yellow. You click on there. Next one, please. And then you will see that you can create your project. You can create your project there. I already have mine. And next one. So you just click on that one. And then you will see here on the left side, there is a column, and there are all these 7 key requirements from the Altai, the assessment list that I mentioned before. And then you click on the first one. It will explain you what it is. And then next slide, please. And then you will see that you get a set of questions. And for example, do you put in place procedures to avoid that end users over rely on the AI system? Remember, the requirement number 1 was about human agency, and human oversight. So you will get a set of questions to answer whether your system is complying with this or not. And next one, please. And then at the end, you answer all these questions. Some of them are high level, some of them are very technical. For example, the second requirement, as I mentioned before. And then you will get an assessment from 0 to 5, and it will give you some sort of score that is depicted on this graphic, right? So you get, for example, that the requirement number 1, human agency and oversight, score was 3, I think, yeah, or 4, maybe 4, and then privacy and data governance, which is requirement 3 was 5, but and then requirement 2 is very low. I just answered some random questions. This is not reflected in our project. We're actually answering all these questions now with the team, with the whole team. So we're not quite there yet. We hope that in the next 2 months, we'll get all these assessments completed. Next one, please. And then you will get a series of recommendations based on the answers that you get, right? So I think this is a very good tool. It's a very good starting point because you can already start. It's not only about the ethics, but you can deal already with a lot of legal questions. And next one, please. And okay, so I will just try to finalize in the next 2 or 3 minutes. And so yeah, so once you deal with all the ethical aspects and you completed this questionnaire, the next step for you to do is to check whether you have any AI system which falls under the risk category of the AI Act. So you have to check whether you have a tool which falls under the prohibited category, right? Or whether it's high risk or low risk or minimal risk. So this is where we're also standing right now. At the moment, it seems that we don't have any unacceptable or any high risk tool. We still have to make sure, but that seems to be the case, which is good because it's also give us less requirements to deal with. So, and then the next step would be to focus more on the AI Act. And next slide, please. And yeah, and this is just what the AI Act does. As you know, yeah, we can discuss that later. And next slide, please. Yeah, and this is just some high-level requirements and general recommendations taking into account the AI Act. As you can see, it's a lot of overlapping with the 7 altai requirements that I mentioned. The high-level requirements, you have robust data and data governance. This is all this GDPR, data security stuff. Record keeping and logging, this is part of requirement 2 to some extent. You have the transparency, you have the human oversight, which was requirement number 1. There's a lot of overlapping, which is good. Why? Because the AI Act took into account the trustworthy AI principle, of course. So I will stop here now for the sake of time. Sorry, I extended a little bit, but I also wanted to finalize the presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Let's, I think we have some requests in the chat to share the slides later, and we have a question. I will start with a question, and I think everybody can take the floor. My question, Marcello, and I want to challenge a little bit the presentation, is that this covers very well the AI part, right? But what about the extended reality? I mean, I could use this tool, right, for an AI application without any extended reality, right, or augmented reality. So earlier with Alessandro, we talked about some things like the IPR, like the content, which is important. So how are you addressing this? How this is different for extended reality? Just to till you answer to say that we will be sharing in the XR 5.0 page and the Beyond XR page the recording and the slides of this, or some version of the slides of this presentation. So no worries about this. Yes, please, Marcello, what is special about the extended reality?
Yeah, sure. That's a very good question. So the way I see is the following. The extended realities tools, at least the one that we are using in the project, they contain, most of them, a lot of AI systems, right? Different kind of AI software. And this is why, by default, XR and AI, they kind of go hand in hand, right? So there is a question whether XR is actually an AI system. And there are two different ways of looking at this. One is by using a very broad definition of what AI systems are, and then you have to look at the AI Act, or also in the guidelines. The definition of AI is very broad on purpose, and that also means not only software but hardware, right? So, and then the way I see this is that the XR technology that we use, they have some AI components, and therefore we need to take into account also the AI Act, right? Now, another way to look at this is just the XR device. It doesn't have any AI tool per se, then maybe you don't have to take into account the AI, but this is on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, but what about, special elements of XR? Anyway, I understand. We can broaden the definition of AI. Marina, please feel free to open your camera and introduce yourself and ask the question to Marcello. And then we go to Frank.
Thank you, John. First of all, congratulations, Marcello, for your very clear presentation. I would be very interested to get your slide. I am working as an ethics expert for several European projects, and I found that your approach is very comprehensive. Recently, I start a specialized hub on ethics and legal issues called Helen, counting more than 20 projects, and I would be very glad if you could join us in this effort. Now, my question for you is if you could elaborate a bit more on the impact assessment framework you mentioned together with the standard, if I'm not wrong, UDEIRA or something like that. I would be very interested to listen something about this.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Marina. Regarding Helen, the Helen network, I came across with it on the internet, and I apply already. So somehow I am part of it, and I'm following you on LinkedIn. So a LinkedIn website. But thank you very much for the invitation anyways. So your question is about data privacy impact assessment?
The one you mentioned together with the standard, there was something named UDEIRA framework.
Yeah, UDEIRA. Yes. Okay, so there are two different kind of impact assessment. One is the one coming from the GDPR, right? The data privacy impact assessment. And there is a set of requirements that you need to take into account to see whether you need to do a data protection impact assessment from the beginning or not, right? So what I did is I talked to a lot of partners, and I sent, for example, I had meetings with all the use cases, and I sent them some questionnaires, different kind of questionnaire, which contains some elements of a data protection impact assessment. So I didn't run a data protection impact assessment per se, but I was trying to analyze whether this is something that we need or not. And I came to the broad conclusion that we don't need to do it if we take into account some specific legal requirements such as consent and so on. So that's one thing. The other thing is, as you know, probably in the AI Act also there is this FRIA, right? The Fundamental Rights Impact Assessment, which is slightly different. It's more about fundamental right questions. For example, if you are discriminating people, if your project contains minors, for example, these kind of things, more focused on fundamental rights, and then you have to conduct a FRIA, right? The fundamental rights impact assessment. The million-dollar question is whether you have to conduct both of them. They overlap. This is something that I think in the legal community, we still don't know. There is a lot of uncertainty and confusion about whether you have to run one or the other, right? And in our case, again, I don't think that we need it, and because of all the aspects that we're taking into account. But I heard that in some projects, some project officers, for example, are requesting, but I know of one project that they are dealing with a lot of, it's way more sensitive. It's about human control, border control, and so on. So it takes more these kind of human rights aspects, right? So this is what I can share with you. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, because I also had some doubts about the relationship between the GDPR and the AI Act. It seems to be an overlap there, which we probably will need more clarification from the European regulator at some point. But perhaps you can also share your opinion. I know that you are a lawyer as well. You have a legal background, Marina. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so, for instance, regarding this mix about human right perspective together with the data protection impact assessment, we have something, for instance, in another project, in a IRIGIO project, we have the so-called ethics and data protection impact assessment, trying to mix what you mentioned, the FRIA from the ethics guideline, and the common data protection impact assessment, just to try to cover all the aspects without overlapping. But it is not simple.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Very good question. Very good
Thank you.
question.
What about Irfan? You have a
Yes.
question?
Thank you very much, John. I am from Agora project, Agora Medical project. So I was wondering, this was a brief discussion about XR perspectives, and more importantly, you have been discussing some available regulations like GDPR, like Data Protection Act and AI Act. I am wondering, because I have been, reading a lot of papers and also some white papers that are talking about XR ethics or metaverse ethics perspective. So don't you think that already available guidelines, let's say GDPR and AI Act, somehow when we see the specific use cases of these XR technologies like healthcare, like business, you name it. So don't you think that there is a need to have some specific guidelines that should demonstrate, apart from generally accepting the fact that, okay, data subject should be granted informed consent kind of procedures, and also like GDPR says that there should be proper implications of privacy and security, blah, blah, blah. So what is your perspective in this particular domain? And one last thing, you discussed about trade-off among privacy protection and also innovation. So how you think on this part? At the same time, we want to use these XR oriented or AI oriented technologies, but at the same time, we can't use these technologies at the cost of data, data manipulation, etc. So how you are managing this strict trade-off in this particular project? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. So I guess the question is for me. Maybe I can start, and I don't know if Alessandro would like to chip in as well. All right. So first of all, you say that okay. So we have the regulations such as GDPR and AI Act, and then we have different kind of contexts such as healthcare, right? And then you mentioned something about the data subjects should be granted consent. I mean, and what is my take on the trade-off between privacy and innovation. So this is what I think. I think that every project is very unique, right? So I work on a project, for example, it's not this one, called Mobile Spaces, where we don't use personal data, right? And then of course there is no need to use informed consent because there are no participants or data subject, as it is in the case of the XR 5.0 project that I shared with you before. So in this context, in the later project, I think is mandatory to have informed consent. And every use case in our projects have consent form, and we provided a template for the consent form, and we attach it to our first deliverable as an annex. And so this is something that they can tailor-made to their specific use case. So that's one thing, because this is very important for the participants to agree whether they want to be there or not, and to understand what the project is about, the AI tools and their rights. Right, this is what I mentioned. Now, regarding your question regarding privacy and innovation, I understand that this stifles innovation to some extent. This is what I mentioned to Alessandro at the beginning, that it might be that some people share the opposite idea, right? Because, and then you have to, it slows down the process. I totally agree with you. I spent at least 2 or 3 months discussing this with the 6 pilot cases. It takes a lot of energy, and we had to, besides all the questionnaires that I sent, we had to make a follow-up Zoom meeting with each pilot to make sure that we are on the same page. And this is slowing innovation on the one hand. On the other hand, it's good, because once you get there, and then you can create more trust with the participants, and that can be the next step for innovation, as well, as Alessandro was hinting. But of course, I try to be pragmatic in this case. So this is my opinion. I don't know, Alessandro, if you would like to chip in.
Well, I agree with you. I just would like to add that in a way there are maybe also alternatives in terms of how the data, like this, let's say the decision-making process or the governance of sensitive data or data in general. For example, this, I guess, sort of famous example of the data commons in Barcelona, and if, like, just to have everyone on the same page, the basic idea is that citizens can decide what their data is used for. So in a way they can collaborate with both businesses and the public sector, prioritizing their use of personal data for and data in general on the issues that they maybe feel more important and pressing for them. Overall, on privacy and innovation, I feel like we have solutions also to deal with this. For example, synthetic data. Obviously, there's also certain issues or challenges in terms of, especially now with the quantum being more closer and closer to us, the idea that it's fairly easy to re-engineer back. Now I'm missing the word. These data sets to the real data. So again, obviously things that to be handled. I also would like to make a point that maybe also clarifies what we were discussing before. The implementation of regulation, it's a big challenge. When it comes to GDPR, personally, I think that the issue comes from the implementation and not the regulation per se, or more from the implementation rather than the regulation per se. I'm gonna give you an example. I have found myself in several situations where public sector organizations did not want to, let's say, experiment with a certain public service because they were afraid of being non-compliant with the GDPR, when in fact, looking at the GDPR, those data were collected with the purpose of providing a certain services, and what they were doing was perfectly in line with the GDPR. So I think it's also a matter of how it's implemented. I understand there's a big issue in terms of what you were saying, Marcelo, before, no, the threshold that it puts. But I think it's also, it forces people to reflect on that, and hopefully it advances also our perspective on this in a way, also in terms of awareness, skills, even.
Excellent. Any other questions? If not, I would like to thank you. It took a little bit of more time, but we have accounted for it. I would like to thank you all for attending, but especially to our speakers. We are going to make available the recording, and we're going to make available the presentations via the page of XR 5.0, but also the page of the Beyond XR cluster. And please do keep in touch, because we have more seminars and webinars coming from the cluster, not so much on the ethical and legal aspects, but we're going to cover other interesting technological aspects of extended reality, like the content generation, like applications in different sectors like business models and so on. We have a frequency of approximately a webinar every 2 months. So stay tuned for the next one around March 2025. You will find information through the social media, of course, the LinkedIn, the page of the cluster, the page of XR 5.0. Thank you very much for joining today, and have a great week ahead. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.